At just 18 years old, Omari Thorne walked into Crestview Motors with one thing on his mind: buying his first car. He had his own money, his plan, and his future ahead of him. But within minutes, they dismissed him, without a second thought. The next morning, his billionaire mother walked through those same doors. And what happened after? Made sure no one there ever forgot his name. Omari's Thursday was planned to the minute. Late morning in Smyrna, Tennessee, the air was thick, humid, and heavy, the kind of weather that whispered of an oncoming summer storm. But Omari didn't mind. Dressed in a gray windbreaker, black cargo pants, and beat-up white Nikes, he stepped out of his car with quiet confidence. Tucked under his arm was a simple blue plastic folder. Inside, 5 listings, used hybrid cars all under $15,000. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just dependable vehicles to get him to Georgia Tech, where he'd just been accepted into their engineering program. He wasn't there to show off. He was there to invest in his future. As he stepped into Crestview Motors, he held the door for a woman leaving the dealership. She smiled. The receptionist inside didn't. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyes still glued to her screen. "Yeah," Omari said, holding up his folder. "I printed out a few listings. Some Sonatas, a Civic. I was hoping to check them out. Are you here with your parents?" "No, ma'am. I'm buying it myself." A thin smile, a vague wave toward the lot. "Someone will be out shortly." But no one came. He waited by the glass doors. Outside, the cars sparkled and rose. He spotted the Civic, same VIN as the listing. He took a step outside, only to be cut off by a tall man in a red Crestview polo and slacks. "You lost?" the man asked, glancing him up and down, his clothes, his shoes, not the folder in his hand. "No," Omari replied. "I'm here to buy a car." The salesman didn't even glance at the folder. "This isn't a place to hang around unless you're serious. We've had incidents." "Incidents?" "Yeah, people coming around, checking out cars they can't afford, taking pictures, causing problems." Omari's stomach twisted, but his voice stayed steady. "I'm not here for pictures. I just want to test drive a car." The man chuckled without humor. "Come back with a parent, or someone who can talk financing." "I don't need a parent," Omari said firmly. "I'm paying cash. The account's in my name." The man took a step back. "Look, not trying to be rude. Just not today, okay? Maybe try one of the used lots down the road. Something more in your range." And there it was. Omari didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked down at the folder in his hands, then over to the Civic. Then he turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. What the staff at Crestview Motors didn't know was who Omari Thorne really was. The drive home was silent. No music, just the soft squeak of windshield wipers as the first drizzle hit the glass. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He processed it quietly, the way he always did. He drove past the park where he used to race his cousin, past the library that still had old summer reading posters in the window. Familiar streets, familiar silence. But something felt different now, like the pavement under his tires wasn't quite as solid as it used to be. Back home, the air smelled like lavender and black coffee, his mother's favorites. Omari slipped off his shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat on the couch with his laptop. His folder rested beside him. Upstairs, his mother's voice floated through the house, measured, confident. "Dr. Ian Thorne, CEO, medical researcher, mother." She could speak to the CDC board in the morning and patch up her son's scraped knee by afternoon. When she finally came downstairs, she asked, "Find anything you liked?" Omari hesitated. "Crestview had some okay cars. Did you test drive anything?" He shook his head. "They told me to come back with a parent. Said I looked like I was just hanging around." She paused, no anger, just precision. "Did they say something else?" "Not really, just made it clear I didn't belong." Ayan placed her hand on his knee, then got up and began putting away dishes, quietly, but her mind already working. Upstairs, she made one call, not to raise her voice, not to make a scene, just to gather information about the dealership, the owner, the staff. By morning, she knew everything she needed. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, the doors at Crestview Motors opened again. But this time it wasn't Omari, it was Dr. Ayan Thorne. "I didn't come here because my son asked me to." Dr. Ian Thorne said calmly, adjusting her shoulder bag. He didn't even want me to. Told me not to make it a big deal. She paused. But that's the difference between him and me. He gives grace. I give reminders. Dan, the general manager, swallowed hard. Ayan turned toward the exit. Oh, and the car out front? She added over her shoulder. Not for sale. Just a visual aid. Then she walked out. No dramatics, no threats. Just a silence that lingered long after the door closed. Inside, no one moved. Dan didn't speak for 30 seconds. His ears burned, not from embarrassment, but from realization. He wasn't new to this job. He'd been in car sales for years. He could tell the difference between someone causing a scene and someone simply holding up a mirror. And Dr. Thorne had done the latter, with absolute clarity. Behind him, the receptionist whispered, "Was that the kid from yesterday?" "The one we—" Dan didn't answer. Instead, he walked to his office, closed the door, and sat down. Clicked his pen twice, then once more, staring at the desk like it was suddenly foreign. Finally, he called in the salesman from the day before, the same one in the red Crestview polo. "Chris, close the door." Chris stepped in, already looking uneasy. "What's up?" he asked. "You remember the kid from yesterday?" Dan asked. "Black teenager. Said he was looking for used hybrids." Chris nodded. "Yeah, the one hanging around the Civic." Dan folded his hands. "He wasn't hanging around. He had listings. Pre-approved paperwork. He was ready to buy. His mother came in this morning." Chris scoffed lightly. "Okay, but I mean, he looked like—" Dan cut him off. "He looked like what, Chris?" Chris paused, mouth open. No answer. Dan leaned back. "You ever think maybe the reason we don't get many black customers is because they walk in, feel how we look at them, and walk right back out?" Chris squirmed. "It's not like that." "You sure?" Dan asked. "Because she didn't ask for a discount, didn't raise her voice. She wasn't angry. She just made sure we understood who we turned away. Not because he couldn't afford the car, but because we assumed he couldn't." Chris looked down at the floor, quiet now. Dan pointed out the office window toward the lot. "Every week we complain about online competition, about people wasting our time. But maybe we're the ones wasting opportunities because we decide who's worth our time before they even open their mouths." Chris didn't respond. He didn't need to. He was already replaying the moment in his mind, and probably every other time he'd wave someone off with the same tired excuse. Back at home, Omari was still upstairs in bed, earbuds in, rewatching a video on solar battery conversion. His morning was peaceful, quiet. He had no idea what had just happened back at the dealership, and he didn't need to, because his mother hadn't gone there to be seen. She'd gone because she'd seen it all before. The memory came back to her as she drove home, not out of rage, but something older, a kind of ache, a quiet accumulation of moments over a lifetime. When she was 24, in a pharmacy lab in Columbus, and a supplier assumed she was an intern. When she was 30, pitching a synthetic blood project to a panel of investors, and they only made eye contact with her white co-founder. When she sat on a panel of experts, and someone asked if she was the marketing rep. Didn't matter how many degrees she had, some people only saw what they were willing to. She couldn't protect Omari from that reality, but she could make sure someone remembered the next time they tried it. Later that afternoon, while Dr. Thorne was on a Zoom call from her home office, Dan at Crestview Motors drafted an internal memo. Nothing dramatic, just a reminder about dealership values, about professionalism, about treating every person with the respect they deserve, regardless of how they look when they walk through the door. He didn't send it because he feared a lawsuit. Ayan hadn't threatened anything. She didn't need to. She'd just spoken the truth. And truth, when spoken plainly, has a way of sticking. The person who felt it the most, ironically, wasn't even there. Ayan hadn't always been the woman who could walk into a room and stop it cold with a sentence. That kind of strength isn't inherited, it's forged. She remembered being the quiet girl in Birmingham, standing in line for reduced lunch. Her mother worked nights cleaning offices. Her father left before she turned 6. She read anatomy guides while other kids snuck off behind the gym to smoke. People underestimated her constantly, called her aggressive when she spoke with clarity, said she was too serious when she didn't laugh at tired jokes. So she poured herself into building something no one could take away. When she had Omari, she gave him a different kind of life, but she made sure it came with perspective. By 11, he could build an IKEA dresser. By 13, he was volunteering at free clinics while his friends slept in. Not because she wanted him to suffer, because she wanted him to see the world, the work, the weight. She also taught him when to speak up and when to walk away. That's why she wasn't surprised when he came home the day before, silent and withdrawn. He wasn't scared. He wasn't bitter. He was holding it in, because he learned that sometimes silence echoes louder than rage. But what cut her deepest was how quickly he had accepted it. Not because he didn't care, but because he was used to it. She remembered when he was 10 and walking home from basketball practice, carrying his gym bag and science fair project, when a neighbor called the police to report a suspicious boy. She remembered the cruiser pulling up, Omari sitting quietly on the curb, not scared, not confused, just tired. She never told him, but that was the night she started looking into security systems, not to keep people out, but to protect him from being misread, because she knew the world wouldn't always offer her son the same grace she fought to earn. Later that evening, Omari came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. "You still got the list of dealerships you liked better?" Ayaan didn't say much. She just unlocked her phone and handed it to him. A note titled "Better Options" sat there, still saved, even after she'd bought the Rolls. Omari scrolled through it and paused on one. "Think this one'll take me seriously?" Ayaan looked at him. "They'd better." He smiled faintly, not bitter, just more aware. But what neither of them knew was that someone else had been paying closer attention than expected. The next morning at Crestview Motors felt different. No meeting was held, no press release was drafted, but something had shifted. The sales floor, usually full of scripted smiles and background chatter, was quieter. Not tense, not guilty, just reflective. And in the back office, as Dan shaved that morning, staring into his own reflection, he'd already made a decision. Dan Grom stared at his razor-blurred reflection that morning and knew the problem ran deeper than yesterday's mistake. It wasn't just the way they treated one young man. It was the culture he'd let calcify under his watch. Image before intent, assumption before dialogue. He arrived early, catching Chris as the salesman unlocked the same gray Civic Omari had wanted. "Detail this one today," Dan said. "Tires, battery, everything." Chris shrugged. "You think the kid'll come back?" "No," Dan answered. "It's not about him anymore. It's about what we do next." A few miles away, Dr. Omari Thorne had already moved on. She hadn't posted on social media, called a reporter, or chased an apology. She'd never walked into Crestview for outrage points. She'd walked in to give a quiet surgical reminder. Blind spots have consequences. Her mother's old mantra echoed over her coffee. Some people only see what they want until you show them what they missed. Omari, meanwhile, was texting with a salesperson across town, the kind who actually answered questions and didn't flinch at the words cash purchase. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew what he wanted. He knew what he wouldn't tolerate. That afternoon, Ayaan's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost let it ring out, but curiosity won. "Dr. Thorne, this is Dan Grom from Crestview Motors." Silence on her end. "I know you didn't ask for anything," he said, "but I wanted you to know we've met with the team. We're revising how we greet walk-ins, especially young buyers. A bias awareness module starts next month. It isn't everything, but it's a start." Ayaan didn't thank him. Precision, not rudeness. "Make sure it sticks," she said. "I will. And tell your son he left more of an impact than he probably realizes." She ended the call and stood there in the kitchen, phone still in hand. Validation wasn't her fuel, but honesty, finally spoken, settled the air. That evening, Omari came in from the garage, key fob spinning on his finger. "Think I'm going with the Sonata," he said. "From the other place?" He nodded. "They walked me through everything. No weird energy, just facts. Felt different." She smiled. "Solid choice. Very you." He hesitated. "Mom, did you say something to them?" "I had a conversation." "Like a serious one?" "I wasn't there to yell," she said, "just to remind them who they missed." Omari's smile spread, slow and genuine. Thanks. You thanked me by not letting it change how you see yourself. Both knew it without saying. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Sometimes the loudest message arrives in the quietest voice. A week later, the Sonata sat in their driveway, paint still slick from its final polish. Omari had already taken a few short drives, back roads, empty parking lots. He liked its quiet confidence. No flash, just performance. He spoke little about Crestview after that, not because he forgot, but because the moment no longer defined him. The lesson had seeped in like rain into soil, absorbed, not evaporated. Ayana saw it in subtle shifts, the way he carried himself in public, the double check of his bank app before a purchase, the question of whether a collared shirt might help when he later took his cousin truck shopping. He wasn't changing who he was, only calibrating, the way she had countless times before. One night, while Omari coached his cousin through parallel parking, Ayan sifted grant proposals at her desk. Her gaze drifted to a photo pinned to the monitor. 9-year-old Omari, grinning under a science fair ribbon, an oversized t-shirt swallowing his frame. Behind him sat their old Honda Accord, the car she'd driven all through med school. It wasn't the ribbon that made her smile. It was the look in his eyes. Potential then, clarity now. A few days later, an unmarked envelope arrived. Inside, a simple handwritten note. We're doing better now because someone reminded us why we have to. Thank you. Crestview Motors. She folded the note and tucked it in the back of her planner, not to remember them, but to remember that people can change when they're finally forced to see what they've ignored. That evening, she told Omari about the letter. He chuckled. Guess they finally figured it out. She met his eyes. You figured it out a long time ago. He gave a modest shrug. Still feels good, though. It does, she agreed, laughing softly. Dusk draped long shadows across the driveway. Omari stood beside the Sonata, arms folded, just looking. Then he slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and eased onto the street. No music, no audience, just movement. And in that hum of quiet motion, one truth settled in deeper than any lecture. The world doesn't get to decide your worth, but it will notice when you carry it, calmly, without apology. Stories like Omari's unfold every day. Not all of them feature a Rolls-Royce pulling up to prove a point, but each one offers a choice, to pause, to rethink, to see people fully before deciding who they are. If this story struck a chord, share it. Let someone else feel the echo. And subscribe for more tales that speak softly, but stay with you long after the last word fades.